Director, this past Sunday, Mr. Cummings, ranking member on the Oversight Committee, said based on everything he's seen regarding the IRS case, based on everything he's seen, the case is solved. Is Mr. Cummings accurate in his assessment?
Could you repeat that, if you would?
Based on everything I've seen, quoting Mr. Cummings, the case is solved. This is regarding the IRS scandal.
Which case?
The IRS scandal.
The IRS case?
Yeah.
You know, the IRS case is currently under investigation, and basically it's just started.
Yeah. What can you tell us? I mean, you started a month ago. What can you tell us about this? Have you found have you found the now infamous 2 rogue agents? Have you discovered who those people are?
Needless to say, because it's under investigation, I can't give out any.
Can you tell me some basics? Can you tell me how many agents, investigators you've assigned to the case?
May be able to do that, but I'd have to get back to you.
Can you tell me who the lead investigator is?
Off the top of my head, no.
This is the most important issue in front of the country the last 6 weeks. You don't know who's heading up the case? Who the lead investigator is?
At this juncture, no, I do not know who the.
Can you get that information to us? We'd like to know. We'd like to know how many people you've assigned to look into this situation.
I have not had a recent briefing on it. I had a briefing on it when we first initiated it, but I have not had a recent briefing as to where we are.
So you don't know who's leading the case?
I do not know who is the lead agent.
Do you know if you've talked to any of the victims? Have you talked to any of the groups who were targeted by their government? Have you met with any of the Tea Party folks since May 14th, 2013?
I don't know what the status of the interviews are by the team that's on it.
Would you expect that that's been done?
Certainly at some point in time in the course of the investigation will be done, but generally at the outset of the investigation you get the documents so that you can have a real.
But don't you normally talk to the victims?
I do not know specifically what is happening.
In your extensive record and history and investigative work, don't you typically talk to the victim? It's a criminal investigation. Don't you typically talk to the victims pretty soon?
I'm sure it will happen.
So did the FBI contact any of these same victims? Were they contacted by the FBI prior to the investigation when these same groups were applying for tax-exempt status? Did the FBI pay some of these individuals a visit?
I do not know.
Pardon?
I do not know.
You don't know?
I do not know.
Some of them testified that they were paid a visit by the FBI. Specifically, Catherine Engelbrecht in Texas said she was visited by the FBI. She was head of True the Vote. Is that true or not?
Do not know.
You do not know. Okay. If the FBI did contact people involved in the IRS scandal, victims groups, prior to the investigation when they were applying for tax-exempt status, why was that the case? Why would you be looking into it? And was there possibly coordination with the IRS in why you targeted them?
You're asking me details about the investigation. I'd be happy to get back.
I'm not asking you details about the investigation. I'm saying why were people targeted before the investigation started? Why were they contacted by the FBI, people who are now part of Tea Party groups who were targeted by the IRS?
You're asking questions about details of the investigation. I'd be happy to take
that. Is not a detail about the investigation. That took place prior to the investigation started.
May I please finish? You're asking detailed questions about the investigation. I'd be happy to get back to you and answer those questions that I can, understanding.
I'm asking basic questions about the investigation, like who's heading it up, and you can't tell me that. Can you get back to me on any group who was targeted by the IRS who the FBI visited with prior to the investigation starting, while they were applying for tax? That would be important information for this committee to have. Can you get that to me?
We'll look at the questions and try to respond.
Have you reviewed the Inspector General's report regarding the IRS scandal?
I have been through it, yes.
Do you have any concerns about the way the Inspector General did the report and collected information?
I did not focus on that at all. I was looking.
Well, let me ask you a couple of things. Is it typically appropriate for the investigator to have one of the central players in this, Ms. Holly Paz, who was director of one of the key players at the tax exempt division, set in on all the interviews, almost all the interviews with employees in that division? Is that typically how an investigation is done?
I'm not familiar with those circumstances. I understand what you're saying about those circumstances, so not being familiar with it, I can't.
In your time as an investigator, is that how you would do interviews with the boss sitting next to the person you're trying to get information from?
Well, again,
Is it appropriate for Holly, the Inspector General came out in a transcribed interview that our staff has done, the Oversight Committee staff has done, is it appropriate to have her collect the data and give it to the Inspector General?
I am not familiar with the.
If that happened, is that appropriate?
I'm not going to speculate.
Let me ask one last thing, because this did happen. Mr. Chairman, last question. So is it appropriate when the Inspector General is doing his investigation, doing his audit, to give information to the very people he's investigating in the course of the investigation and not share that same information with the Oversight Committee. Specifically, May 30th of last year, the Inspector General told Doug Shulman that the terms Tea Party, Patriot, 912 were used to identify groups and put them on a list. He told them that was going on at the IRS. He told them that a year ago. 4 days later, he told the General Counsel at Treasury, Chris Meade, the same information, but did not share that with the committee who asked for the investigation. The committee who has oversight over the Inspector Generals and all federal agencies did not share that information with us. Is that typically how an investigation is supposed to work?
Again, you're talking about circumstances with which I am not familiar. Each investigation is a little bit different, and I really can't comment on what was appropriate in that particular investigation without knowing and sitting down and going through the facts.
But that's, if I could, Mr. Chairman, and I will stop. That's the point. You've had a month now to investigate. This has been the biggest story in the country, and you can't even tell me who the lead investigator is? You can't tell me that actions the Inspector General took, which are not typically how investigations are done, you can't tell me if that's appropriate or not? This is not speculation. This is what happened, and you can't tell me how many agents are assigned to the most important news story, maybe the most important.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The director will be allowed to answer the question, and if he can't answer it today, we would definitely expect that he answer it in writing to us as promptly as possible.
I'd be happy to take your questions in writing, sir.